Welcome to the Pilot Hill Project panel discussion. The Pilot Hill Project won the 2020 WyoPass Project of the Year Award. I turn the time over to Sarah Brown Matthews, Executive Director of Pilot Hill, Inc.
Thank you, Paul. I'd like to start out by thanking WyoPass for inviting us to do this panel discussion. This is fun for us to have this opportunity to share the Pilot Hill vision and dream, and hopefully to answer any questions that you may have with the idea that we'd love to see similar projects to Pilot Hill happen all over the state and the country and hopefully and possibly the world. There are three of us on the panel today. Ellie Wachtel is joining us from Frisco, Colorado. Ellie was the lead on the project team for the SE group, who we hired through an RFP process. We're also joined by Ember Hall, who is our Wyoming Game and Fish Department expert on the Pilot Hill project and partner with the Game and Fish Department for management of a portion of the project. And we'll get into those details soon. But we're all honored to be here with you today and are looking forward to just kind of giving you the best introduction we can to how we went about the planning process and what our next steps are. So, Ellie, thanks for helping us with the slide presentation here. We can go on to the next one, but just to set the stage a little bit for you, what I'd like to do is just show you a map of the project area adjacent to the city of Laramie. So to the east of the property, you'll see the University of Wyoming and Jacoby Golf Course area, along with another portion of a section in kind of a brownish gray color. All of the property that is from that section to the west, the schoolyard, what's called the schoolyard trails, section 25, half section of 25, quarter section of 30, all of 31, 32, 33, etc., outlined in blue, is part of the project area. In total, it's 7,100 acres, and it's a combination of ownership with the University of Wyoming, the Wyoming Office of State Lands, and then as you see, that yellow portion is a small portion of acreage that is BLM land. Adjoining the property to the far east is the Medicine Bow National Forest. Because of that adjacency and the opportunity to connect the city of Laramie with Medicine Bow National Forest, this property has been kind of on the wish list of our community for over 40 years. There were early conversations with the private property owner about possibly doing something to protect this land as an outdoor open space park to benefit Albany County and the city of Laramie. Those initial inquiries didn't ever really pan out, but it stayed on everyone's mind. And in 2017, this opportunity came up again, and the city and the county were able to collaborate along with the university to make this happen. The project area is unique in terms of topography. It starts at the city of Laramie at 7,000 feet, rises to over 8,000 feet, almost 9,000 feet at the top of Pilot Hill. The soil and diversity of plant life and wildlife on the property is rather typical of this part of Wyoming. But the unique aspect of it is that with the exposed limestone on this property, it also directly serves as a filter system for the aquifer that Laramie relies on for about 60% of our drinking water. It's called the Casper Aquifer. So protecting this area and that critical recharge zone upslope from the city wells was a major factor in our interest in this project. As I mentioned earlier, in the fall of 2017, the private landowner, Warren Land and Livestock, let us know that he was at the point where he was ready to sell the property. He offered the first rights to the county and the University of Wyoming, and entered into a sales agreement with us. It gave us a year to try to figure out how we might be able to come up with this, the money to secure the land. We did an appraisal immediately. The value came out at $10.5 million, and the county and the university then formed a oversight committee to try to work through different options for securing the land. Land or fundraising was definitely considered as an option, but as most of you probably know, Albany County is one of the poorest counties in the state per capita, and coming up with 10.5 million in Albany County was really a stretch. So we looked at other avenues, considered quite a few things, and ended up turning to the Wyoming Office of State Lands and Investments to propose a state land exchange for the property within Pilot Hill for other state parcels in our region. They were very amenable to the idea. There was quite a few. There were quite a few parcels that were of interest to landowners in Albany County and Laramie County, and the Warren livestock owners were also open to this opportunity and extended the purchase agreement for us for another 2 years to allow us to go through the land exchange process. As that started to become a reality, the Oversight Committee also felt that it was really important to work on this Pilot Hill land use plan for a wide variety of reasons. But one of the key ones is that we knew that the agreements with the state, with the university, and with the county would all, and the BLM would all benefit from having a really sophisticated and thorough land use plan that outlined our goals and our plans for managing the property. In 2020, the University of Wyoming did come forward. We invited them to support the project with the $2 million gift. They actually were able to do a little bit more than $2 million, and we did that in the form of helping purchase about a third of the private land that ended up in the project. And the land exchange was then finalized, securing the remaining acres for the total 7,000 acres on Pilot Hill. This was really all a huge collaborative project. Our project partners were invaluable to our ability to pull this off. You see just a snapshot of some of the major project partners here on this slide, but honestly, I think if we were to put the hundreds of others that supported the project in a variety of ways, that would take up the entire slide presentation. It truly was a huge collaboration in the county and the city, and an interesting collaboration in that it brought together really diverse groups that had, in some cases, never worked together before. And we're really pleased with how that helped bridge a lot of relationships and create new opportunities for people for future projects. Again, very community driven. We had not only the Executive Oversight Committee, which was primarily established with a lot of leaders in our community. Two of our legislators, retired Supreme Court Justice Kite, directors of the Laramie River Conservation District, just across the board, top-notch individuals with a lot of influence, but then also tremendous subcommittees that really honed in on land management, communication, fundraising, and how the economic impact would be viewed by the community. I do want to give a shout out in the Land Management Committee, Derek Tierney and Todd Feeser from the city of Laramie. Derek nominated us for this award, but we're really critical partners in helping us determine how the land management plan might flesh out and gave us really great expert advice. We did 2 different community surveys. The first one was really focused primarily on the community interest overall in Pilot Hill. The second one honed in specifically more on how people anticipated using the property and what their priorities were for us developing the property. That was really critical in how we then built out the land use plan. We also had lots and lots of public meetings. We had quarterly forums that were kind of similar to this, where we tried to keep the community updated. We did over 100 targeted presentations to different clubs and groups in town that so we could talk with people one-on-one. We always had booths at our farmers markets and Jubilee days and all the public events that you know of in Laramie. We were present at homecoming and the parade and talking to people. And we just really did our best to engage all the key partners in the community, and especially the partners like the BLM, the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, U.S. Forest Service, the university, the county, the city, the state and city, and then also others that we leaned on for expertise, Wyoming Department of Transportation, et cetera, as subgroup and smaller working committees. And again, the overarching goals were to preserve this over 7,000 acres of undeveloped open space. Protecting the Casper Aquifer Recharge Zone is always one of the first things that come to mind as we make decisions. The area conserves critical wildlife habitat, and Amber will talk more about that in her portion of this presentation. We wanted to enhance recreational opportunities for our community and definitely educational opportunities as well. And then hopefully leverage all of this to promote economic development in Laramie, both through tourism and by attracting more businesses and a vibrant workforce. And then are we at the, I think we're at the transition, aren't we, Ellie?
I think this is your last one.
Oh, okay. Just kind of the why plan. I've touched on this a little bit previously, but we had a lot of diverse goals from the community. There were some people that wanted the entire thing to be a bike park, others that wanted the entire thing to be a conservation area only with no human access. And of course, then the aquifer and water protection folks were constantly raising their hands. The one group that unfortunately we couldn't accommodate was the motorized recreation user group. That was stated clearly in the purchase agreement by the current landowner, and it was a direct conflict with our goals to protect the aquifer. So we did the best we could to really listen to and get community information and engagement by multiple stakeholders. We worked hard to make sure that the plan would support what we knew we'd need with legal agreements with the Office of State Lands, with the county, with the university, Game and Fish, BLM, and as I'm learning, YDOT and others as we move forward with this. It also allowed us to be really collaborative, having this plan demonstrated the collaborative nature of not only the planning, but the management. And it hopefully will help us with our ongoing needs as far as making sure that we have really long-term sustainable funding for this. It's unique in that it's not a city or county or state park yet. It may end up being that in 10 or 15 years, but right now it's kind of a unique entity, and the funding needs are really important for helping us build it out and manage it. And then also, just really forced us to sit down and think strategically about how we were going to implement the goals and make sure that we were staying true to the vision for the project. All right, I'll let Ellie take over.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah. So I'm Ellie Wachtel with SD Group, and we're a planning firm out of Frisco, Colorado. who work a lot on recreation planning projects, especially where they intersect with communities, and we were really excited to work on this project. So the land use plan that we developed with Sarah, it documents that community vision, a guide for the development of the trail infrastructure and other access to the property, including the wildlife habitat management area and the more recreation-oriented part of the project area. And then we really want this to be a plan that Sarah continues to use for those management proposals, leases, and as kind of an organizational structure as well. So we were brought on in summer 2019 and did some initial understanding of the vision, talking to the community, and also looking at some of the known constraints of the property, habitat, slopes, and sort of came up with an initial concept, high-level vision. And then in the fall of 2019, started working really closely with Embert Game and Fish, the Forest Service, state parks, on continuing to move towards a draft concept, along with spending a lot of time out on those 7,000 acres, really understanding what's out there. And so once we had a draft concept, we continued to review that with our interagency working group, which, as I'll talk about later, was that Forest Service, Game and Fish, and State Parks and State Lands entity, and then bringing it to the public in kind of one of those last public meetings that happened before COVID. And that brought us to a final concept in the spring of 2020 that we then shared virtually. So understanding the natural resource constraints. As Sarah was mentioning, the aquifer is really important. So thinking about how uses would align with that. Habitat of elk, antelope, moose, other species. And then once you're out on the property, there's lots of cliffs that you can't exactly route a trail through, some places with soils that weren't compatible, washes, and then also archaeological sites. So also working with the state archaeologist office. So kind of the engagement that happened within our process was, well, first off, taking advantage of all the work that Sarah and her team had been doing, collecting input before we got started. There were community access days out on the property back in fall of 2019. So getting people kind of out there to do an initial exploration and then hearing what they thought. We reviewed the concept really closely. We had about 200 members of the public come out to a couple of public meetings, and 100 people take a survey afterwards about that initial concept. And then continuing those neighborhood meetings and event booths that Sarah was talking about, and involvement from the committees and agencies. So kind of the project started with this land management committee that included both the Game and Fish, state parks, U.S. Forest Service, nearby landowners, the city, and so forth. And we kind of continued to consult with that group, but then created this smaller group of those state and federal agencies to really dive into what does management of this look like? What are some of the constraints, for example, that Game and Fish can tell us about from a habitat perspective as we develop the concept. And yeah, so that was all around management, connectivity, habitat, and future operations. So to talk a little bit about kind of this last public meeting we did, this picture looks so foreign, but we had small discussion groups because people of Laramie, so many of them have contributed to this project, are so invested. So we really wanted this time where they could point their fingers at maps, annotate them, and inform what our final concept would be. So this is an example of what one group did to a map. And so, you know, after hearing from the public, some of the things that came to the surface were this interest in educational opportunities, key connections of where they wanted to be able to access the property. The separation of uses was a pretty big topic between mountain biking, hiking, horseback riding, and that was definitely a tough nut to crack. One thing we kind of realized is we're not going to get full alignment on this. I mean, and even, within mountain bikers, for example, there's some mountain bikers who want all mountain bike only trails, and there's some who want all multi-use trails. And so we'll look at the concept a little bit closer later, but we ended up going with really a mix of some of those some use only trails and then mixed or multi-use trails as well. Really getting that desired experience around this remoteness, being in nature, not wanting this to be overdeveloped. And then really kind of the most important thing was finding that proper balance between conservation and recreation. So that was a really key topic throughout this process. And I think one of the things that we knew going into our process that it was a goal of the Pilot Hill project to find that balance. And so we both wanted that to be something we discussed with Game and Fish and other public land managers around finding that balance, but also a conversation we had with the public. And so we kind of presented a lot of the elements of what Pilot Hill could look like to them to kind of see if that fit with their vision. So one of the big conversations we had was around the density of trails, how many acres per mile of trail, and comparing that to other places they knew to understand if, okay, compared to Kirk Gowdy, we want it to be more like this. And what we ended up doing is taking the northern portion of the property where there was fewer habitat concerns and making that kind of the recreation corridor. I want to say that's about 4,000 acres. And that's where the vast majority of the trail system and the use would be. And then having Game and Fish be involved in planning a wildlife habitat management area for 3,000 acres to the south. And so that's where Game and Fish came in. And Ember will talk about the role of that. And so to look at this on a map, this area down here is that wildlife habitat management area. And then up here is the recreation corridor where the majority of the trails were planned.
Well, thanks, Ellie. My name is Ember Hall. I'm the wildlife coordinator for the Wyoming Game and Fish Department here in the Laramie region, which is the region that overlaps, obviously, the Pilot Hill project. So I wanted to take a few minutes and just kind of talk through the Game and Fish process and what this looked like from an agency standpoint. I'll say out of the gate, this WHMA, Wildlife Habitat Management Area, is unique. All of our properties are unique, and this one takes on some particularly interesting things. So we were involved, as Sarah and Ellie have mentioned, really early on with this land use committee. And one of the cool things, or I think maybe a takeaway for those of you that might be thinking about exploring these sorts of options in your own communities, is that every step of the way, there was a lot of communication and it was a lot of conversation about, whether Game and Fish was even the right organization to be involved. And a lot of that really hinged on the values that came out from the community. If this was going to be a good fit to have the department involved from a community values perspective. So we started out on the land use committee way back, and I think Sarah said it was 2017 or 20. I get the years confused, but really early on. From there, as the process started to gain momentum, we were continuing with the processes that Sarah and Ellie have described, but we also had our own internal process to go through. Game and Fish is a state agency. We have a lot of boxes we need to check to make something like this happen. So as the process started to gain steam, we developed an initial proposal internal to the department. And that meant checking a couple of pretty key boxes just to decide if this was a good fit from a department perspective. So the first was that we have an internal leadership team that consists of representatives within the department that can speak to aquatic resources, terrestrial resources, hunting, public access, those sorts of things. So we needed to get that team to say if they thought this was a good idea or not. Really fortunately, this was the regional leadership team gave unanimous approval to the project, which was great and was a real cornerstone to us being able to continue. From there, we had to move it through kind of our state agency process. So we did a couple of presentations with the approval from the director's office to the Wyoming Game and Fish Commission. For those of you that don't know, this is a 7-member policy-making board that oversees all activities of the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. So we presented the project to them kind of early on as just like a, hey, heads up, this is something we're talking about. Don't know if it's going to move forward or not, but we want to make sure that you're in the loop, and this would involve some pretty strong department engagement if the project moves forward. So that was kind of the first, like, heads up, this might be happening. And then as we move through those sections that Ellie and Sarah talked about, and the land swap went through, and it looked like things were going to actually happen on the ground, we approached the commission a second time and said, all right, this is really going to happen. We think it's valuable for a number of reasons I'll talk about in just a second. We need official commission approval. And at that point, the 7-member board can say, yeah, we think it's a good idea. No, we think it's a bad idea, or they can strike some kind of a middle ground. In this case, they were really supportive of our idea, and that includes a financial contribution to Pilot Hill Inc., which we haven't quite talked about yet, but it's an oversight board that addresses the entirety of the property. The department makes a contribution to that group to help cover the costs of the property and basically allowing us to manage the wildlife habitat management area. Go on to the next slide, Ellie. So what is a wildlife habitat management area? Well, as you've probably gleaned, these are areas that the Wyoming Game and Fish Department and our Wyoming Game and Fish Commission deem to have particular importance to both the wildlife and to public access, the ability of our constituencies to get out and enjoy wildlife. These units are managed pursuant to what's called Chapter 23 of the Wyoming Game and Fish Department regulations and an approved management plan. So each WHMA, I'd have to look, I think there's about 40 or so in the state, maybe a few more than that. And each of these are managed specific to a management plan that is designed for that specific property. Go ahead and advance. So the goals here for this property in particular, and like I said, they're all different, were fourfold, and you can go ahead and tick through those, Ellie. I think there's more. So they're fourfold. The first was to maintain native winter range habitats for healthy herds of pronghorn, mule deer, and elk. Importantly, the Pilot Hill property contains some of the last remaining winter range for one of our antelope herds that calls this area home. And through kind of progressive subdivision and growth of the Laramie community, we've lost a lot of that winter range. So one of the sort of first big check mark points for us was, this is an opportunity to conserve. I'm gesturing this way because the property is like right out my window. This is an opportunity for us to have some conservation around that really important core part of pronghorn winter range. The second is to provide hunting, wildlife viewing, and conservation education opportunities for the public on the property. The third is to provide native habitats for non-game wildlife, including what we call species of greatest conservation need. These are species that are really high priority for the department from a conservation perspective, but they're not necessarily hunted. And the fourth, and this one is really important, is to maximize conservation opportunities through cross-boundary management. You'll remember Sarah mentioned that there's this adjacency with the U.S. Forest Service on the eastern side of the property. And then, of course, we have this recreation zone on the northern side of the WHMA. So making sure that we're trying to manage those boundaries as seamlessly as possible, both for wildlife and for people. Next slide. So engaging the department, I hope, has been really good for the project. We're certainly very excited about it and find it to be really value added. It does come with a few sideboards. Again, our engagement really is to provide the best benefit that we can for wildlife, and recreation is a second tier benefit for us. So our priority really is on wildlife. And so that comes with some sideboards. The first is that we implement, as we do on most WHMAs, a human presence closure. This is from February 1st to April 30th. This is designed to minimize disturbance to wintering wildlife that's using the property. The second, as Sarah alluded to early, there's no motorized access allowed. This, of course, is property-wide and was contingent as a process in the sale. We do have hunting opportunity on the property. This, again, is consistent with all of our WHMAs, and this is managed through a permission slip system. So basically, there's a series of things that hunters have to do to be able to access the property, and one of those is to acquire a permission slip that the department administers. We do have one trail, which I don't know if Ellie will get to later, but we do have one trail that runs through the property to promote those recreational values. However, this is a multi-use trail. We didn't pursue any single-use trails on the property, and we are asking that bikes remain on the trail because of the intensive recreation use that we expect to see from this user. And then the last piece is that we require dogs to be kept on a leash, and that's just again to mitigate some of the disturbance that can come between wildlife and dogs. I think that's the end of my section, Ellie.
So I'm going to chime in for a little bit just to talk about the collaboration with the Forest Service as well. Obviously, key to our ability to create a trail system that extends from the boundary, our front door here in Laramie, Wyoming, up to the Medicine Bow National Forest, and eventually on, we hope, to Curt Gowdy State Park and Cheyenne, and someday to Fort Collins, was a deep partnership with the U.S. Forest Service here in the Laramie Medicine Bow National Forest offices. We have collaborated extensively with them on a number of things, the whole cross-border management piece that Ember talked about in particular, but also what connectivity opportunities might exist on the Forest Service land for Pilot Hill. We have right now the Forest Service, I'll get into this more in the next slide. They're in a process of really looking at the entire Pole Mountain unit of the Medicine Bow National Forest, not just the border with Pilot Hill, to do a long-range strategic plan on their non-motorized trail systems and use. But in the interim, they've been working with us to make sure that we could have a suggested travel corridor that would join with the Forest Service that would also meet their needs in making sure that any travel corridors were avoided communication sites and some of the natural springs that are up on the property, different watershed areas and other areas that are sensitive. So you'll see on our master plan that SE Group created for us, there is a categorical exemption trail that the Forest Service is allowing us to build initially, but there are also some trails that are shown that are just kind of suggestions. They will be fleshed out more thoroughly in the future and through the gateways planning process that the Medicine Bow National Forest is undertaking. And they may or may not mirror exactly the suggested routes that we have on our plan, but they are working with us to make sure that there will be opportunities for people to travel through the Forest Service lands onto Pilot Hill in a really seamless way, and that connectivity and those adjoining places are really carefully planned and well constructed. So Ellie, do you want to move to the next slide? This just shows, this map that the Forest Service has shows just the very tip of the Pilot Hill property up there in the northeast corner, and the trail systems that we'll be developing, and where the categorical exemption trail will be located from the Forest Service. To orient you to this map a little bit, you can see I-80 running through the map down below. You can also see as you get off at the Tri-City exit, which is also the Lincoln Monument, and Highway 210 to head on the old Happy Jack Road to Cheyenne, that the connecting corridor will kind of allow the Forest Service to have people who are recreating on the Tri-City trails, perhaps camping at Yellow Pine, to have a way through a trail to connect to the very top of the Pilot Hill property, and then follow our trail system down to town. So again, short term, the Forest Service has committed to this one categorical exemption trail, and they worked already with the SE Group to make sure that we knew where that adjoining point would be on the property boundary. And long term, they're working on this much larger gateways non-motorized planning process. And through that, we anticipate additional opportunities for connectivity on Pilot Hill.
Great. So after all the talking about it, this is the concept that we ended up coming up with just kind of a few things to note about it. Overall, it's about 43 miles of trail. Some of that does include the existing roads on the property that would continue to be used for recreational use that are shown in brown. We definitely, hearing Sarah and Ember talk, it makes me realize just how much we really tried to have what we designed on this area really reflect what's around it. The schoolyard trails is a really popular mountain bike use primarily in there right now. And so to the north of it, using that land there to create what's shown in yellow is kind of this hiking only, trail running only area. And then really concentrating a lot of the trails further up on the property, given the potential for access from the Forest Service, but also because of the way the kind of ridges and valleys and where there's tree cover, it makes it so that it doesn't feel like there's as many trails up there, and you can still have that feeling of kind of being alone. And then really important was just being able to have those views back to the city of Laramie and to the Snowy Range, and making sure a lot of these trails up here hit those points. And then down here is that one trail we've talked about for through the WHMA. And then allowing through horses through here and identifying accesses from different points in the city and sort of connecting them, as we'll talk about later, to the phasing and the level of use and the type of users that we're expecting. So in thinking about trail design, a really important piece of this is making sure that there's sustainable trails that have as limited impact on the natural environment as possible, modest slopes to prevent erosion. And so we really wanted to provide the Pilot Hill project with a framework for that. And just trying to also limit as much as we could how much this would cost to build. Not trying to cross every drainage that would need a bridge that was out there, trying to find kind of the easiest spot to do that, and responding to what was out there rather than imposing something on the system. One of the big conversations we had with the public as well was around this desired trail character, whether you're looking for something more primitive or something more enhanced that's a little more built up, and kind of the next stage that we never even floated for this property is kind of the constructed bike park feel. And so these types of images for hiking only trails, multi-use trails, and bike trails were presented to the public, and we kind of got to understand what was the desired mix and included recommendations for both those types throughout the trail system. So phasing. So as you could see from the last map, there's a lot of trails shown on there, and kind of the expectation based on funding was not, and the length of the construction season was not that all of this could be built overnight. And so we really came up with a thoughtful phasing plan, breaking it into 3 different phases to ensure that that first phase kind of offers something for everyone, really gets people out on the property, gets them to the top, which they've been staring at for years as this land has been private, and then continuing to kind of add features and also think about how to appropriately spread people out and respond to new potential access points to the system through the different phases. So I think I want to say the first phase is about 20 miles of trails, and even each of these phases is not a single year. But then the following 2 phases are each about 10 miles of trails. And with this, I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah to talk about kind of our vision for managing these 7,000 acres.
Thanks, Ellie. So I don't want to read this out loud to everybody. I know you're all capable of that. But again, some of the key aspects of the management process that we're undertaking now is to make sure that we remain collaborative, that we keep the values at the forefront of protecting the aquifer, protecting wildlife habitat, providing recreational opportunities, healthy lifestyles for our community, and supporting the economic vitality of Albany County, which really, especially in the budget crisis that we're in the state, is important for us because we don't have, we don't have minerals that can be mined in Albany County. We're really reliant on tourism and recreation, and are focused on leveraging that in ways that still maintain the quality of life that we all cherish in Wyoming. The approach does try to really continue to ensure that there's inclusive access across the area. As Ember mentioned, there are seasonal closures, there are restrictions on uses, but we do want to make sure that we're as inclusive for everyone to be able to utilize the property, and that we're really harnessing the knowledge and the capacity of experienced land managers, because those of us that work for Pilot Hill or serve on the board of directors know that expertise is really going to be critical in ending up with what we hope to have as a world-class recreational and wildlife habitat area in Wyoming. So with that in mind, we're also, of course, striving for consistency and trying to make sure that we're taking into consideration needs of various user groups. You can switch to the next slide, Ellie. We worked long and hard with a lot of experts about what the management model might look like. Ended up creating a federally recognized 501c3, called it Pilot Hill Inc., because we weren't very creative. Pilot Hill Inc. board of directors, though, is really strategically set up so that we have even representation from the different key stakeholders on the board of directors. We also have participation by different recreation user groups, representation of some of the neighboring landowners. As you saw probably earlier on the map, there are houses and private property that abut the land. And this group has been charged with not only raising the funds needed for the infrastructure and to manage the property, but to make sure that we're also creating the amenities needed, the parking lots, the pit toilets eventually, the signage, so that people are not getting lost up on the property. We're in charge of maintaining and managing different programming and events, approving research projects that are happening on the property now and will happen in the future, making decisions with things like, do dogs need to be on leash or off leash in different areas? What will the hours for the property be? E-bikes is one that is going to be coming down the pike for us. Right now, the Forest Service does not allow e-bikes on non-motorized trails, and so we're partnering with them and in respecting that. But that may change through this Gateways planning process. We also, like I mentioned, are leaning heavily on the expertise of the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. There's a research project already happening on the property to look at wildlife movement on the land. We were able to get over 60 game cameras up on the property prior to opening it to the public, and we'll be monitoring that over time to see what impact we're having and utilizing that to help us make management decisions. And of course, also really looking at user counts and activity on the property as we constantly consider emergency access for anyone on the property that might turn an ankle or have a need to be helped off the land. It's 9 square miles. It's a lot of property, a lot of difficult terrain. It's steeper than a lot of people realize. And as you all know, in Wyoming, the weather can turn on a dime. So safety is a big consideration as well. In the land use plan, you'll see that we had initially also hoped that we might have the professional partnership of Wyoming State Parks in helping us manage the trail system in the recreation corridor. As you all know, the state legislature is meeting right now to figure out how they're going to reduce budgets across the state of all state agencies. And with that in mind, we discussed with state parks the timing of an ask for that commitment and determined that right now is just not the time. That may come back up in a few years. We just don't know. We're also talking with the city and the county about their management expertise, and eventually hoping that Pilot Hill Inc., after doing a lot of the hard work to get the park system built out, will be able to become more like a Friends of Pilot Hill organization, and will transition ultimate management to the experts like the Game and Fish and some other entity that is used to wearing a park ranger hat. On to the next slide. We're using this plan every day. I have to tell you that I have a really worn copy on my desk. I utilize it in every meeting that we hold with different partners and agencies. It's really been helpful to the board in planning and decision making for our annual budgeting and determining what priorities we have for summer construction. It's critical in all the fundraising and grant proposals that we put out. As we've mentioned, all the legal agreements that we currently have and contracts for the property are based on the land use plan, and it is helping us think strategically about the future and the long-term sustainability of this site adjacent to Laramie. Right now, the property is partially opened. We were able in September to celebrate with our community and welcome people on a limited basis to Pilot Hill. There's one route, we call it route number 4 right now, that is an old 2-track road that leads from the schoolyard section all the way to the top, that people have enjoyed extensively when the weather's permitted. We will be building 7 additional trail miles, this spring. We hope to have them completed by the 1st of July, and we'll be inviting more activity on the property once those multi-use trails are in place. That will add a couple of different loop options on the property, and also a different route for people to get all the way to the top, not just route number 4. And it also, as Ember mentioned, we'll be opening the WHMA area again for human presence, primarily for horseback riding and hiking in that area on February 1st. They will be issuing hunting permits this coming fall, so we look forward to offering that opportunity to our community as well for hunting within the WHMA. One thing I didn't really talk extensively about at the beginning that I probably should have was just the schoolyard section. You may have noticed that there was one state section in the overall plan that was originally kind of gave us momentum to really jump on the offer from the landowner. That state section had been under lease with the county and in partnership with a local nonprofit called BikeNet for several years, and they had already built about 11 miles of trails on that land, and it really demonstrated the fact that the community could come together and make these visions of close, accessible recreation, non-motorized recreation available to the community. The BikeNet nonprofit did agree to transition management of that section to the Pilot Hill Inc. Organization as well. And we're grateful to them for that. But it also gave us a really good head start on trails that, as I mentioned, they already have 11 miles worth of trails that adjoin to a city trail called Jacoby Ridge that adjoins to other city trails that expand across the Laramie community to the Laramie River and to our park systems. So this really is a project that's building on some great work that's already been done in Laramie by the City Recreation Department and by BikeNet. This is our web address site up on the page here, and we're open to any questions you might have.
Thanks, Sarah. So if there's any questions, we're a small group. Just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away to our panelists.
Sarah, maybe to get some juices flowing for thinking about questions, I actually have a question. When I look at sort of in total this process that we've gone through, it seems like a lot of pieces fell together. Are there particular points that you would sort of draw out as like, this is what made, I guess, the secret sauce, if you will, or this is what sort of really catalyzed this project to success? Are there sort of key features or key ways that we design things that you think helped made it be successful?
I think there are several components. Thank you for that nice question. I think there are several components. The collaborative nature of the project was from this get-go really one of the most important aspects of our success. The leadership team was, I feel, and this was before I ever rose, put my hand up and said I'd like to be part of this, was really thoughtfully assembled and was really diligent in thinking about who are the key leaders and players in our community that can contribute a variety of different ideas and approaches. Honestly, I think when the county commissioners first signed the purchase agreement, they thought the only option is to raise $10.5 million. And because this committee was open to ideas and exploring different options, I think that allowed us to not get stuck in one rut, but take a lot of parallel paths until we came to places where we could say, oh, this route really makes sense, and we can let these other options go at this point because this opportunity makes sense. I also think that one of the visions all the way along was the fact that we knew that our community could come together and make something like this happen, but we didn't necessarily take a stance of feeling like the model that we come up with is the one and only model that will last forever. We want the access on the property and the open space conservation to last in perpetuity. So we need to be flexible in thinking about what changes might need to be made over time. And I think that is really critical and allowed for us to approach the plan in a way that did say there are some things that are set in stone, but there are some things that still need to be decided and will be decided over time. Getting the cooperation and the truly remarkable commitment from the Wyoming Game and Fish is a huge part of that, because we know that having that expertise on board will make our success possible in the future, and that this might become a model for other communities to create different collaborations to protect open space.
I think from an outsider's perspective, one thing that really came across is just how broad and large the supporters from the community were, who were lending their expertise and volunteering for the project, and looking into the land exchange, and that there was this very large group rooting for this to succeed and working for it to succeed. Was really special.
Paul, I'm not seeing any other questions from your planners. We do hope any of you that had the chance to be with us live today and or might possibly watch this recording in the future won't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd love to give you a tour of the property. We'd love to show you some of the unique exposed limestone areas that we're really carefully protecting for aquifer recharge reasons. Talk to you about some of the mud puddles that we are wading through as we continue to figure this out, and also about some of the strategies that we use to move this forward, not only with the Wyoming Office of State Lands, but with other partners, U.S. Forest Service, Game and Fish, et cetera, et cetera. We do hope that other communities in Wyoming will have the good fortune of having unique open spaces conserved right outside their back doors as well, so that all of us together can keep a little elbow room from the neighbors next door, but also really leverage people's passion for being in the outdoors in Wyoming.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. And thanks to all our panelists. Sarah, I'm going to put your contact information in probably at the end of the video posting, so people can reach out to you if they do have any questions like that. Then other than that, thanks to all of our members. If you haven't paid for your and registered for your membership with WyoPass, please do that. That's how we continue to be able to present these webinars. We're going to continue to try to do them every month going forward. We haven't exactly nailed down our dates for the April webinar, but we have a couple things in the works. Stay tuned to WyoPass and to our newsletter. Other than that, I think I posted and Sarah just put her contact information in the chat. I posted the AICP CM credit link in the chat as well, and then that'll also be posted as part of on our website. So thank you all. Take care and get your snow shovels out.